You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, my name's Anthony Leveritz, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and on behalf of my partner and producer, Jason Cardona, we are super pleased to have Marques Johnson join us today. I got the pleasure of coaching Marques Johnson as a young student athlete at Willamette University many years ago. He is now the head of business development in charge of music for YouTube, has raised by a NBA father, and just had a great conversation about his journey through athletics, journey through the business world, and as a parent raising kids in this crazy world. Was a really enjoyable conversation. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Marques, welcome to the show. I will have introduced you properly before this, but for everybody that doesn't know you, how do you describe yourself and who you are, where you are in the business world today? Who is Marques Johnson?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I would describe myself as a dad. Is kind of what takes up most of my mental energy and time these days. I'm a husband. I've been happily married almost 15 years this year.
Good for you.
And I currently work at YouTube as a music business development manager, where I help make sure that all of the music on YouTube stays on YouTube and doesn't get taken down, which is mostly just arguing with other people about, how we split up a very big pile of money.
So you argue for a living?
Yeah.
Does that get tiresome?
You know what? No, I don't know what is wrong with my brain, but I get energized by it, and somebody has to stop me. Usually, sometimes I've gotten in my older age. I've gotten to the point where I can kind of be like, you filled up the meter. Like, you should probably just stop now. This isn't helping any further. So just stop. And I can kind of stop myself these days. But in the past, somebody usually has to jump in there because I can keep going.
Well, hopefully you get all your arguing out in work, so none of it translates into your personal life. I should do that more often.
Right.
My wife would appreciate that if I argued more with. Maybe you and I should have an argument. It'll help my marriage later on today. No, so I want to get into. We're going to get into your business and what you do, and talk about that whole platform and social media towards the end of this. But let's go back to your upbringing. You were raised in the son of a legend, right? Like here in the state of Oregon, one of the all-time greats at Oregon State University. He still holds some records for field goal percentage, and then played in the NBA for a long time. And what was that like for you as a young person, a young athlete, going through wanting to be an athlete at some point in time in your life, and having that as either a role model or something that you were looking to? Was it easy? Was it hard? What was that like for you?
It's interesting because I was born his senior year of college. So I literally grew up in the NBA, with my dad, always being in locker rooms, being around just enormous human beings. One small, aspect of it is my dad is 6'11", I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
I have always felt regular height, or even not tall.
Right.
As being around, if you see me with him, I still look like my dad's son because he still towers over me. And I just grew up around guys that were 6'5" to 7 feet tall all the time. So there's that element of just the normalization of professional sports. I kind of certainly, as I got older into grade school, and kids started wanting to know about my dad or ask me about my dad, and my friends' parents wanted to meet my dad and know my dad. I kind of started to feel like, okay, well, this is like an interesting tool for me, particularly since my dad was he was talented, but he's also kind of a problem child, and still got traded a lot, didn't always get along with his coaches. So we moved around a lot. I grew up, his first team was the Kansas City Kings, and then he got traded to the Chicago Bulls. He was in Chicago for a couple of years. I went to preschool in Chicago, kindergarten in San Antonio when he got traded to the Spurs. Went back to Portland, where my mom's family is from. And so that was a familiar space for me. But spent a few years in Portland where he kind of had his best years of his career, and really kind of put down roots there. He got taken expansion draft to Minnesota, got traded to the Supersonics the same season, and then ended his career at Golden State. So I moved around and that was all before I turned 11. And so part of the experience was constantly pulling up 10 stakes and moving on to the next town, which, you know, as I got older, I started to understand it was kind of more difficult for me to form deep and lasting friendships, because I just viewed them as like a temporary, you know, playmate or friend. But, you know, I also, the flip side of that was, well, my dad is also an NBA basketball player, and it's easy to make friends when your dad is an NBA basketball player. So that was like the kind of double-edged sword of the experiences. You know, I learned to make friends really easily, but also I was kind of melding my own identity into my dad's as a professional basketball player. And, you know, I think it's probably for the best. He had bad ankles and was kind of forced into retirement. You know, like I said, by the time I was in 5th grade. So before I really started going through all the kind of identity crisis stuff, it was probably good for me that he was no longer in the NBA, and I didn't kind of continue to crutch on, you know, who he was and what that experience was like. I wasn't even that into sports either. He and this was a big element of my upbringing, and my dad's philosophy was like, I think he felt like because he was a star and he was in the NBA, and because all that attention and pressure and me always being my father's son whenever anybody meets me, he didn't want to put a lot of pressure on me to play sports. I played soccer like most, you know, kids from 1st grade all the way up until 8th grade. And that was my sport. I didn't play hardly any basketball. You know, we had like a dunk hoop inside where my dad would, you know, dunk on me and stuff like that. But that was the extent of my basketball kind of training. So when I did start playing basketball in middle school, when they kind of first start offering basketball, I was easily the worst player on the team. You know, I had no idea what I was doing. My goal was to not foul anybody, was kind of the thing that I set out to do in 6th grade.
Great goal.
Which it doesn't help the team a lot, but, you know, at least it gave me a goal to go out and execute on. But then by the time, you know, I got to 8th grade, I had a few years of playing basketball, was still the worst person on the team, but I was starting to get taller at that stage and starting to, you know, at least know how to play the game. I could understand pass and screen away and you know, backdoor cuts and that kind of stuff. But it is kind of difficult, you know, at that age to not be good at the sport that you are supposed to be and you grew up around. But I just was kind of oblivious to it because I had no pressure whatsoever from my dad. He was as helpful as I wanted him to be. You know, if I asked him to come shoot hoops with me or rebound or teach me stuff, he would. But he kind of was very laissez-faire about the whole thing. And I really viewed it as like, well, I should say, so I mentioned I played soccer all the way through 8th grade. I think I was pretty good at soccer. Who can say this age, you know, because it's been so long. But I was the best player on my team. I don't know what level I was at in terms of everything.
You scored goals.
Yeah. And I just gave that up because I thought, well, okay, I'm getting older now. I'm in middle school. I'm supposed to play basketball, right? Like that's the family thing. So I'm going to quit this thing that I'm good at and do this thing I'm not good at all. And I honestly regret that decision to this day, but it felt like in my mind at that time, I was like, well, obviously I'm going to start playing basketball now that we're getting serious. And so you coached me.
Yeah.
So you'll know that like I probably came to the program still pretty rough, pretty raw as a player.
When did that change for you? So at some point in time, you decided you wanted to be a college player at some point in time, right? And you were also a really good track athlete to go along with it. And we'll talk about being in multiple sports in college, which is a really difficult thing and rare thing to do. But what was that shift for you? And when did you decide that, okay, basketball is my deal. I want to go play in college. I've got this going on. And my guess is, I want to talk about this with you, kind of dive into this, because there's a lot of kids out there. Nobody that I know of wakes up in the morning at 10 years old, 11 years old, and says, I want to be a division or a D3 basketball player, right? Or I want to be an NAIA basketball player. If they are, they're very rare. Everybody wants to play at the level we see on TV.
Yeah.
So when did that change for you that you knew you wanted to be a player at the college level?
Yeah, my family's expectation was that I would go to college. That was always just part of the plan that was going to happen. Both my parents went to Oregon State. Obviously my dad is a very interesting kind of journey as well on his own, like how he got to the NBA, but it was just kind of in my mind that it was baked into the cake that I would be going to college. And that also was just the path to get to the NBA. And I would call it part delusion, in part, just having been around it my whole life. And another twist of kind of my family's stories that my grandfather was a director of player personnel for the Trailblazers and the GM for the Trailblazers from inception all the way through the 80s. So like NBA was like basically literally in my blood. And
for people out there, who was that?
My grandpa's name was Stuart Inman. He's infamous for kind of architecting the Sam Bowie draft.
Yeah.
It's a whole team of people have to make that decision, but it kind of, at the end of the day, the buck stops with him on that. But that's on my mom's side of the family. So the NBA was very attainable in my middle school age brain. That was a thing you could do. Now, there's, if you could have talked sense into me at the time, there's an element of, okay, well, your dad's 6'11", maybe you'll get to 6'11", but you're like, 5'10" now. And you just started playing and you're terrible. Like you're very obviously and very aware of the fact you're the worst player on your team. So how are you going to get to the NBA? I was like, well, we'll figure it out was kind of, I think, what was in my brain. Like I'll just work really hard and I'll get better and then I'll make it to the NBA. I had no concept of the odds, and college would be one stop along the way. So I knew I needed to get recruited to go to college. I think the downside of my dad being very laissez-faire is that there was no plan. They enrolled me in the high school that was closest to my then house, Grant High School in Portland, Oregon. The program was not good. It had a kind of a legacy. Terrell Brandon went to Grant High School. Yeah. Mark Radford, who's one of my dad's teammates, an All-American basketball player.
Had some players come through Grant.
Yeah. And so it wasn't that the school was not known for basketball, but at the time the program was really terrible. And they just kind of put me there. And so you have a player who's underdeveloped, doesn't have a lot of experience, hasn't really hit a growth spurt yet, and is going into a program that's not good. And I still didn't, and my dad did nothing to kind of, be like, well, if you think you're going to go play basketball in college, you think you want to go play basketball in the NBA, let's make some moves here. You don't need to go to Grant, like go to Benson, go to one of the other schools in the area, because Portland's a magnet school district. I could have gone to any of the schools, and Benson had a much better program and a lot of players going and playing in college. So when did that idea enter my mind? It did not. Like that is my family's thing, is that we're very, very laid back, like way too laid back. It's not a goal setting family. It's just like a hope and pray type of a family, and just go along and you'll figure it out as you go along, which is nice. You can be resilient. You can recover from setbacks and all that kind of stuff. But it's not great if you have really huge aspirations, because that does require a plan. That does require some planning and some steps and all that kind of stuff. So I did not have a great, I didn't have good mentoring. I didn't have good coaching. I didn't have good player development, all the way up until my senior year. And I was mostly getting by on the fact that I did start to grow. And
you were super athletic.
I was a phenomenal athlete. I was a phenomenal athlete, but I was better than all the other guys that I was playing with as an athlete. And so that helped kind of crutch me through to where I could continue to get shots up in my driveway or get to the gym. And, eventually as I got, as I went to college, I started working with, coaches in the off season and stuff like that to work on my game. But I was a late bloomer, like late developer, late to the game, all that kind of stuff. So getting to Division I hoops was probably never going to be the thing for me. mostly because we just didn't take my development or my early career very seriously.
So as you now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that we can unpack. But so as that kind of realization happened for you, how difficult was that for you, or was it not difficult for you when you got to Willamette University, which was our gain?
Yeah.
Certainly, he turned into being a hell of a player at that level. But what was sort of the was it hard to wake up and say, damn it, I didn't make it where I wanted to go? Or was it just, I'm here and I'm going to enjoy this experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there was actually an interesting kind of inflection point where, as my dad's in the Hall of Fame at Oregon State and all this stuff, and he's still a big name in Corvallis. And I can't remember the coach of Oregon State at the time, but he took me down to meet him when I was my senior year. And the coach basically said, look, like verbatim, he said, I'll give you a shot because of your dad. If you want to walk on because of who your dad is, I'll let you walk on. And I was like, in my mind, I was a respectful young man, but in my mind, I was like, F you, man. I'm good. I might not be like a world beater yet, but I'm good. I was all conference in high school. My team was terrible, so we didn't like go to the state tournament or anything like that. But I was like, okay, I'm good. And your program isn't that great, by the way. You're sure it's D1. So, at that stage, on the drive back home, my dad was like, so what do you think? I was like, I want to go where where I'm going to have an impact, and B, where, I'm wanted. I don't want charity. I'm 18.
That's such a great point for parents out there listening that are going through this process right now with that kid that's 16, 17 years old, thinking about colleges for next year. I tell people all the time, like, what's the biggest factor of where you go? It's not the D or the 1 or the 2 or the 3 or the NAI. It's not the level. It is about going where you're the most wanted, because they're going to put the most into you and your development and to your success if you feel like they want you. It is a critical component for people to go through. And if you're being recruited by 10 Division I schools or 20 Division I schools, that still needs to be part of that component. Where do I feel that they value me the most?
Yeah, where am I going to fit in? There's also the element of, well, this is a more storied program, or this is a higher level of competition and all that kind of stuff. But I think about this with, for my kids and their development too. But for me, it was not about pride. It was about, like I said, I wanted to go play basketball, and I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to make my own story. And going and living in my dad's shadow, on the charity of the coach at the time, was not going to be my story. That's not what I was interested in. Now, I have a brother. He's bigger, faster, and stronger than me. And he played for a much smaller, school in Oregon in high school. And he did get kind of recruited to go to Oregon State. And so he did take that path. I mean, we had very different careers as a result. While he did get recruited, he wasn't highly sought after by the coach. He was essentially a walk-on, and he got very few minutes, in his time at Oregon State, and had a different experience to me. Whereas I got to Willamette, and we could talk about my dismay of being on the JV team my freshman year. But I got to Willamette, and I felt like, okay, I see the path to having an impact here, and I'm going to bust my ass to get all the way onto the team, playing minutes, and I'm going to develop from there. And I think as I look back on that, like, I think we had very different, therefore, me and my brother had very different development paths. While he was obviously playing at a higher level, against bigger and better teammates and opponents, he just wasn't getting the attention from the coaching staff. He wasn't getting the looks and the minutes that he needed to develop. Whereas, the JV team offered me an opportunity, like, as I can kind of be honest with myself about, the past. I still had only basically 4 or 5 years of competitive basketball experience by the time I got to Willamette. And so there was still a lot to develop in my game. And that gave me that opportunity. And I really do look at that with my kids now as they are on different development curves. I have a son and a daughter. My son Hunter's 12. My daughter Kyle is 10. They have different levels of passion for the sport. They both play soccer. They have different levels of passion for the game, different kind of energies. My son Hunter kind of is more like me. He's super skinny, really tall. And Kyle's also she's just a tank girl. Like, she's just very strong, much stronger than the girls she plays against. And so I look at them and I'm like, okay, I can't treat them both the same way in terms of their development. And I can't the teams that I'm choosing to put them on, they're both in different programs. They play for different clubs because this club is a good fit for Kyle and this club over here is a better fit for my son. And Hunter in particular has been kind of behind the development curve, I would say, of his age group currently. And there's a host of reasons for that, and I think, as I look back at how my dad handled my training, and I've had these conversations with him, like in adulthood, I told him, look, I really wish you had pushed me harder in basketball, because the unspoken message I got from you from not pushing me was that you didn't believe that I could get to the NBA, that I could get to college, and that was a motivator for me on the one hand, but I just missed out on the push. I missed out on my dad being part of that story, and so when I get to my kids, I still have this perspective of everybody's going to go on their own journey.
Yeah, that's right.
My brother and me obviously went just very different paths the whole way. And we ended up at different outcomes, but we both had enjoyed some level of success. And all of that was without my dad,
yeah,
guiding or steering us. So we both sort of just stumbled into those different paths and along the way. And if, I had some guidance, and I understand the wisdom of my dad's approach, but I also sort of took the good parts of that. Like, I'm not going to be maniacal about trying to force my kids, going out in the rain, like, Serena and Venus Williams' dad, that they're going to become professional, soccer players come hell or high water. But I am going to, I do understand that, younger children, there's lessons to be learned about hard work. So let's use soccer or whatever sport that they want to play to teach them that you're gonna, and the beautiful thing about sports, especially for young kids and competitive sports, is this is where they get to learn some of life's lessons before there's any consequences. So, you and I were talking in another conversation about competitiveness and that thing. And I've been trying to get my son, trying to light a fire in my son, that competitive fire.
Don't panic. It'll come. Don't panic. It comes at different times for every kid.
Yeah, it's just not his personality, or so I thought. He's just a nice guy, doesn't have a care in the world. So why is he going to, compete super hard against some kid who wants to beat him? He's not understanding that. But it's so funny where, as they get older, their brains are developing. They're learning new things about the world. New, hormones are kicking in and that kind of stuff. And it happens at different stages for different kids. And for him in particular, because he hasn't had that fire, he's constantly kind of getting overlooked. He's constantly getting put on the B team. He's, he more recently, as he's really started to kind of get the desire for himself to out compete his kind of peers, he got cut from his kind of current club. And that was a painful lesson to watch as, a parent, to watch it, like, literally get rejected, get the news that, like, we don't want you. But I'm so happy that it happened to him, because now he gets it. He understands that I can't just be happy to be on the team. I need to continue to not only earn my spot on the team, but there's also guys ahead of me who I don't want them to be ahead of me. I want to be ahead of them. And that's not always a lesson you can just explain by, making them watch a movie, or, playing
Rudy.
a song. Yeah. maybe that's the thing that inspires the kid. He's reading a Japanese manga called Blue Lock, which is about a soccer team. It's about the search for the lead striker for the Japanese national team. and this book is just blowing his mind. This kind of comic book is blowing his mind, and it's like really unlocking for him how different people have different strengths, but they have weaknesses, and you have to exploit your strengths and compensate for your weaknesses. And these are lessons I've been trying to explain to him for years, through father-son talks, post-game, post-mortems, and it's just dad yapping to him.
Yeah.
But this thing is putting it in a context that and hitting him at this time where he really needs it. And so now I'm just sitting back and watching the growth and watching him now, as much as it was me kind of guiding him along the trail. Now he's taking off and running on his own. And
I think it's such an important point, right? That if handled appropriately, athletics can be the best classroom for life that any of us ever get to go through as a young person, because it's safe. There's no paychecks associated with it. It's not the pros. We're not waking up every day and it's a job, but there are natural consequences that come from getting cut, being the best player, and everything in between, right? Like there is a great life lesson there. And I think the important part for parents, for many athletes, are more hands-off approach with their kids than parents who have not experienced that level, right? And so having that background that you've had is really going to help your kids. And parents have to remember what you said is that they have their own journey, just like you had your own journey, and you can't relive your journey through them.
Yeah.
That's a critical component to that development of that young person.
Yeah, 100%. And I think my personal take on it is, you should be encouraging, and you should give your kids the confidence that they need to continue on their journey. You don't want them to get discouraged. You don't want them to start putting too much pressure on themselves, because I've seen some of my son's teammates, because New Jersey is an insane place for youth sports and soccer in particular. Some kids are putting way too much pressure on themselves, and for those parents of those kids, they got to go the other way. They have to help their kids see that there's more to life, and to help them identify create an identity outside of sports. For me, when I fell short after my college career, I wanted to keep playing. I wanted to try to find a team that I could play semi-pro or overseas or something like that. But that I kind of ran into a dead end with that. And then at that point I was like, okay, I've spent the last 5 or 6 years, more 10 years of my life dedicated to being a basketball player. And now that's done. And I had to, kind of redefine myself or try to develop my identity outside of basketball. And that was, a little bit painful, but not too painful. And it's something that, I think you can do much earlier than that. You don't have to wait till it's all taken away from you.
Yeah.
To do that. And some people honestly never do. Some people struggle to, extract themselves from what they were. And
that becomes who they are, not what they did.
So I think we gotta be careful with kids in particular to not even let it get to that point. I'm very cognizant of, like, even though they're putting a lot of hours into their sports, I'm emphasizing that it's about improvement and growth and learning and challenging yourself, and not that it's about winning, not that it's about making the A team. Those goals are important, but that's not what life is about. And that's not what I'm, pushing them to get out of it.
It's the process, right? And learning how to fail, right? Learning how to fail and get back up from it. I want to go back. You played basketball, obviously, in college at a very, a high level university of, academically. And then you also were a track athlete. And did you do track? I left midway through your career, so to chase my dream in playing and coaching. But what did you play? Did you run track all 4 years?
Yeah.
So what was, for you, being a multi-sport athlete? Obviously, you played soccer, you played basketball, you ran track. What were the benefits that you got from being a multi-sport athlete instead of just doing the one thing all the time? And then I'll ask you the second part of that after you answer that.
Yeah, I think I never played soccer like seriously. Like I said, it's like elementary school, middle school. So I got friendship out of that. That was what I learned from that
which is important.
Yeah, my friends when I was a kid were soccer teammates. And that was a cool thing that we could share that together. But as an athlete, switching over to basketball and having to learn an entirely new kind of system and understanding of how the game works and what the meta game you're trying to accomplish and all that kind of stuff is, to me, just a new challenge. And it gave me I will say it was an early lab of challenging myself to learn something new, to put myself out there and start over and not kind of cling to the thing that I was comfortable with and already pretty good at. I had no intention of becoming a track athlete in high school. I just, like I said, I started my athleticism really kind of came out after puberty. And, I was a good dunker in high school. And after one of the games against our big rivals, Jefferson High School, I had an amazing dunk, core memory established, crowds going wild. After the game, the track coach came up to me, literally in a after school special movie or something like that. But
I was at that game, by the way.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
He said, well, hey, great dunk. Have you ever considered coming out for track and doing high jump? And I said, no. And he goes, okay, well, come see me after 7th period on Friday or whatever, and we'll go out to the track. And so this would have been like my junior year of high school. And so I go out there and it's fun. You're just jumping over a bar and landing in a pit. So how hard can it be? But just being honest, there's girls out there too,
Yeah.
It's a springtime sport. So the weather's getting nicer and it's after basketball. So it was like a nice come down from this thing that I'm really passionate and working hard at. So it just seemed like a really natural thing to do. And it's nice when people will say, hey, you could be good at this. And so I started to do that. And I pretty quickly realized that, it's for field events, you can either do it or you can't. There's a lot of training to get better at it. But for the most part, the mechanics are already there if you're a 1-foot jumper like I was. So going out to do that, it was more or less a fun, easygoing thing. But then I quickly realized I was pretty good at it. I was winning most of my meets, not because I was some phenom, but because it's just, the Portland Interscholastic League high school track meets.
Yeah.
And the way the track works, of course, is you earn points for the wider track team. And so the track coach's main job is just to fill every event with a warm body so that you can get some points out of it. And that's all I was there to do. I did long jump. I did triple jump too. I wasn't as good at those things. But I was the city champ in high jump 2 times. I went to the state track meet. I got 6th place or something at the state track meet. And then I was like, okay, well, that was cool. That was fun. It was a good experience, something to do, keep me in shape, maybe help to develop my athleticism a little bit more. But I found success in doing that. And that, built my confidence up. Just my baseline level of confidence was, hey, I got this other thing that I'm good at. And it takes, I guess I could say, it takes a little bit of pressure off of being good at basketball. Being a dual sport athlete kind of helps to take a few of the eggs out of the basketball basket and put it into something else.
It's good for the brain.
Yeah.
It's great for the brain.
I was a pretty good student too, or at least a smart student, maybe not a great actual student. As we found out when I got to college and I was, my grades dropped, through the floor when I first got there. No adult supervision, there to play baskbasketball, not really worried about it.
You didn't call me adult supervision in those days? Come on now, man.
So the same thing happened to me when I got to Willamette, because I didn't get recruited for track, but the track coach was an insanely persuasive person. He called me into his office one day because he was at the gym.
Is that Kelly or Matt?
Kelly.
Yeah.
And
I need to have him on the show. He's a remarkable dude.
Unbelievable. Just this, I don't even know how he got me to do it.
He coached Bo Jackson and Marques Johnson. So that's his claim to fame.
Yeah.
In the Olympic team. He's got a pretty good resume.
Yeah. He would be a great guy.
He's a great guy.
Super charismatic. And he talked me into doing it in college too, even though I told him, he said, so, do you want to, high jump? And I said, no, I don't. And he's like, okay, well, I think you should do it. I think he's just like, just come out. And then the same thing happened to me. I came out. There's college girls that are, track athletes running around the track.
See a theme here.
I got out of the gym and I was like, okay, I'll stay and do a couple of things. But I do think that all jokes aside, I do think it is useful, and I think you got to kind of one thing I'm curious to get your take on in terms of like youth sports and everything.
Yeah.
I'm new to being a dad and
Yeah.
in youth sports, but I do see that the kind of professionalization of kids makes it more and more difficult for kids to branch out and try and do other things. I have my son. I'm cognizant of the fact he's a soccer player. He doesn't really care about basketball that much.
Yeah.
But I'm cognizant of the fact the guy could end up being 6'8".
Yeah.
The genes are there.
Yep.
So if he turns 6'8", you're not going to be a great soccer player. Like
yep.
They just aren't out there.
Yep.
But 6'8" is useful in basketball. So I just want him to at least be familiar with the game, so he doesn't get into 8th grade like I was and not have a clue of what's going on.
So I think that's so important, Marcus. That's the thing that, that we've talked a lot about on the show, and hearing you talk about how you've already identified that. And I think being an athlete in college really helps with that understanding of how to help your kids more. The more I'm around college athletes that have kids, the more hands off and less pressure there is most of the time. That's not 100% true. There's some crazy parents out there that have played in college too. But the idea that kids need to be introduced to multiple sports, to me, is critical, and not just for the sake of doing the sport. But if you're really good at something and all you do is what you're really good at, you're missing out on an opportunity to learn how to fail and do something that's hard for you. You might look silly doing it. You might shoot it in the wrong basket if for basketball. But like you might do something wrong. But learning how to fail, get back up and do it again, that lesson gets missed if all you do is one sport. And then the other part of this that is so critical is the overtraining of the body that leads to burn. I mean, we're talking about 12 and 13-year-old kids getting burned out now in our society from a sport. Like, that's crazy. Like, you shouldn't be burned out about anything when you're 12 years old. Like, what's next, right? And then not only mental burnout, but that physical overuse of when you use that same body motion, you use the same muscles repetitively, those stress-related injuries go through the roof if you don't have a second or third sport that you play. So being able to put all that together for your kids and not forcing them to do something they don't want, but introducing them to multiple things when they're younger to give them opportunity to find what they love, so that you can support that is a critical part of being a parent for a young youth athlete.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my take, and not just mine. From all the people that we've interviewed, it is a common thread for every single person, even the ones that didn't. We interviewed Amy Van Dyken, and for those who have not listened to that interview, it was remarkable. But she started swimming when she was 6, and that's all she did. And she won 6 gold medals, right? She had a pretty successful career. And one of the things that she talked about in the interview was, God, I wished I'd have done other sports. Yeah. My body would have been in better shape. My brain would have been in better shape. I wish I could go back and do some other sports. So I think it's critical to be multifaceted in your approach to athletics at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say as a parent, I would love for that to be possible, but sometimes it's so difficult with the amount of schoolwork that they got to do.
Yeah.
The amount of practicing that they do. Like like right now, my son's soccer practice starts at 7:45 p.m.
Crazy.
Doesn't get done until 9:15, and this guy's got to be up at 6:45 to get ready to go to the bus. So
and this is my chance to just say club sports has become the devil in our country, right? And it's about money. And it's become a money grab, and everybody's telling young people that they have to specialize at a young age. But all they're really saying is, I want you to pay me year round for your kid to be a part of my program. And what that misses is the kid's development, and pays someone to do that. And not that all clubs are bad and have a bad mission, but in general, across the spectrum in our country, it's in every single sport that's out there now, because it's a multi-billion, potentially trillion-dollar industry now in the United States of America.
Yeah, it's really too bad. I've observed that too, for sure, on the soccer side. And I took my son a couple years ago. We went to England with his club to do a little soccer tourism. Basically, they went around, they played against other clubs at
what a great cultural experience.
Yeah, it was a good father-son trip, and so it was valuable for that. But the interesting thing that was kind of illuminating about this problem that we have in the U.S. with club sports is when we visited these academies that were attached to professional soccer teams. Their goal is their profit motive is aligned with player development.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are talking AAU or you're talking club soccer here, the profit motive is just getting your kid onto a team that you pay for. So
you are preach it, man. You are that is you're 100% right.
Yeah.
And at least I think you're right. So you're right. At least for today, you're right. We agree. So you're right.
I mean, it's a little bit odd too for us as well, because the way they make money is by selling your child.
Yes.
That's if they do a good job and your kid gets good and Manchester United comes and wants to have your player, then they got to pay you a fee for all that development work you did. So the clubs that are successful are the clubs that, find kids, invest in them, not just as athletes, but them as competitors, them as, stand up young men that people are going to want as part of their organization. People are going to want to invest actual tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars into. And so I don't wish we had like a buying and selling system necessarily for children. No, that can also get very ugly. But
we do anyway. We do. Club sports is that. AAU basketball is that anyway, right? It's buying and selling, man. It is at a very high level.
Yeah, just kind of compiling a bunch of star athlete kids, and then getting sponsors and all that kind of stuff to build your program. It's not helping make better athletes or better students or better boys and girls. It's just creating this weird situation where they're profiting up everybody's insecurities and lack of understanding about how am I going to get my kid to their goal, or how am I going to get my kid, a college scholarship is really what people want.
And if you look at the NBA, look at how many great players now in the the best league in the world are from another country, right? And they use the academy system of developing their kids, not a play game system, which is what AAU basketball has. Let's practice twice and then play 30 games. Yeah. Let's practice 30 times, then play one game, and then practice 4 or 5 more times and then play another game. Like that's the way it's supposed to be. And you can see the development, the skill level that has really transformed the league to being more international players at that high level versus American grown players.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your transition into the business world, and if any lessons that you learned from your athletics and kind of how you approach that. So you're an attorney, right? Mm-hmm. Like you went to law school at Howard, and I know you did some nonprofit work and kind of found your way through, and then ended up at a small company. I think most people have heard of them. I think it's Google. Yeah. Right? You were I think your profile says general counsel or senior counsel for Google. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my old job, but yes, that was how I got to Google, was as an attorney, as a senior counsel in the music legal group. I previously worked at a record label, Sony Music. You
just went for all the small companies that nobody's ever heard of.
It's funny because it's funny talking to folks who knew me like before I moved to the East Coast, because it actually feels like that was a major demarcation of like my life. I graduated from Willamette, moved to the East Coast with the intention of, I got to get out of Oregon. It's too laid back and easy and comfortable and everything that I know. And I'm just going to get I'm just going to try to find a job that will pay me money rather than trying to pursue a career. And so I kind of recognized it out myself that I needed to get out of my comfort zone.
You needed to find uncomfort to grow.
Yeah. And I don't think I had that. I don't think I had that much insight at the time. I was 22. But I did understand. I could see what the gravity of Portland was going to pull me back into, which was, something I felt like I can always come back to this. If this is, I love Portland. It's, my home, I consider it my hometown, and I wear it on my sleeve out here on the East Coast. But I did kind of recognize that at that point in my life, graduating from college, being a person who, I'm sure this is different from a lot of people on your show, I didn't have any goals. I was not a goal setting person, as we just kind of talked about my sports career. And so I was just kind of taking it one step at a time, but I knew that I felt like these steps were going to lead to the wrong place. So I had to get out of Portland. So moving to the East Coast really got me next to and amongst people who were completely different from me. It is a very different place, the Northeast compared to the Pacific Northwest. The attitudes. I came back. I was out there for like 3 or 4 months, and I came back for Christmas, and I was at a mall, Washington Square Mall in Portland. And I was just even walking in the mall. I was like moving people out of my way because I was like, why is everybody walking so slow here? And that like had already seeped into me on the East Coast, that it's like hustle, hustle, hustle all the time. And so, yes, I ended up into this. I took to that really well in terms of like, I was like, this is invigorating. This is exciting. I feel like, the Frank Sinatra song, I'm going to go to New York, and you can make it there. You can make it anywhere. And then if I hate it, I'll move back to Portland because I love Portland. But it sucked me in, and of course you start putting down roots. I met my wife out here, and we had kids out here, and now all of a sudden I live in New Jersey. That was not part of the plan, but certainly when I went to law school, my idea was I'm really passionate about music. And so I wanted to get into the music business when I went to law school. I had to take a little bit of let's call it a pragmatic path, where it's easier said than done to jump straight into the music industry after law school. So I did get a job at a big firm in New York, most because they were hiring. And it was it was more of let me challenge myself. I know that New York is kind of the top of the legal market in terms of like all the big deals happen there. All the big wig lawyers are there. So I'm just going to go be amongst those people and learn their ways and try and develop as an attorney that way. And then see where I can go from there. Again, it was always in the back of my mind that I might end up coming back to Portland. But that experience at the law firm was a unique time. I started like a week after Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And, if you know anything about New York City law firms, their bread and butter is all the money's coming from Wall Street.
Yeah.
So when that shit all fell apart, it got really scary for lawyers. Like, we don't need all you guys here anymore because there's no work to do at the moment. I took an opportunity to go to Japan. Again, just kind of, I think that was taking the job in New York was kind of the beginning of my kind of life, my new life philosophy, that I was just going to keep seeking growth opportunities. From the law firm, that's when I made the jump over to Sony, which was honestly pure luck. The guy that was hiring was looking for a specific, personal interests, and I've always been a technology guy. I think I was probably the first person at Willamette with an MP3 player, with an iPod. So that's what they were looking for. They were looking for a deal lawyer, which is what I was at the law firm, who was into technology. And so I got that job kind of through sheer luck. And, and from there, what I realized at that time that I took that job at Sony, I took a pay cut. My son was on the way. Like he was like 7 or 8. My wife was 7 or 8 months pregnant when I took a pay cut. And she was like, what are we doing here? A baby on the way. You have a great career at this big law firm. Why are you doing this? You're going to the music industry. It's dying. The CD sales have been tanking for years. And I was just like, look, I just need to make this move. It's a risk, but I think it's going to be better because at a law firm, I was working 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day. All-nighters were happening, fairly regularly. And that was miserable, completely miserable. I was not healthy. I was eating probably 3,000, 4,000 calories a day and sitting at a desk, reading documents all day.
And not good calories.
No, no, it was all Chinese and Indian food, like fried stuff, like super delicious, but really, really heavy and fattening. So not the right approach. So I realized once I got to Sony that like that was kind of the first time I had actually achieved a goal. I went to law school to get into the music business, and now I was a lawyer in the music business, and I was like, okay, you did it. But then I realized I was like, okay, well now what? I'm here. Well, let's start enjoying life now, and let's stop trying to. I had become this person since moving to the East Coast. I had become this person who was very driven, who was very goal oriented, who was making plans, who was setting a target and achieving the target. I was really successful in law school. I was moderately successful at the law firm, and so I was starting to have all this success in my career, but I was also realizing that it was at the expense of my life.
Yeah.
At that point, when my son was born, I was probably 31 or 32. So I was like starting to get into the place where people can start calling you middle-aged. Gray hairs are multiplying, and I was like, this was expensive in terms of life energy to get to this point. So now you really need to focus on prioritization and prioritizing your family and your relationship with your friends and your family back home and your wife. And like you can't do that if you're always concerned about setting and achieving professional goals.
Yeah.
And so from there on, I was like, okay, I'm not going to work harder than I am right now. I'll never work this hard again. I'm going to find a way to support my family, but do it with as little effort into my professional career as is required by the job. And so that's what and like I said, there was that aspect of it, but then there was also, and I think this is important for anybody who wants to kind of survive in corporate America, is you really still, you need to be able to find meaning in what you're doing, because Google has something like 200,000 employees. Okay. I'm one of them. It's tough to feel like your job is meaningful in that context, meaningful to the world. All right.
Yeah.
Are the products and services meaningful to the world? Yes. Does YouTube have great content on it, and that is meaningful to people? Yes. But is what I'm doing at YouTube really that meaningful? That can send you into kind of existential spirals. Even though you feel like, okay, I've achieved a level of success, like external people would kind of validate you externally for the success you have, you could still feel like, well, what is it all? What's the point of this? And so I really, really turned into a person who, like, I had felt that boost of setting a goal and achieving it. But what I really realized, what was meaningful about that, was the growth required to get to that point, not the actual end goal, because you'll always there's always another goal to set. There's always another high to chase. But you gotta enjoy the in-between time. You gotta enjoy the journey and the development, and not to get cliche or hallmark about it.
Yeah.
You really do need to find the meaning in the journey. Otherwise, your life is only meaningful in those moments of achievement. Your life is only good in those times. And I realized, I don't want to get addicted to that. I want to be somebody who has a reason to show up to work every day, not just for those big moments.
Well, you said the word addicted. I want to ask you about, you work for one of the largest tech companies on the planet, right? And are they the largest? Is YouTube the largest on the planet?
Well, if you're going by people, like Amazon in their warehouses, they have like millions of employees, so it's probably Amazon.
Okay, but you're in the conversation for very large companies. So as being immersed in that every day and having kids, right? And we're all dealing with this technology that is amazing, right? Like it's allowing you and I to have a conversation today that anybody who wants to in the world is going to be able to watch this or listen to this, which is really remarkable how that's changed since you and I first met each other, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's also the things that we hear about it and what we see with our kids, and the time and the sort of the mental health stuff that comes up from being on the platforms all the time. As a parent, first, and then also as an executive within one of those companies, how do you think about that as and I don't want to get you in trouble, but how do you think about that as a parent of someone who lives in that world?
Yeah. I think, well, I'll say this. These are all products that are designed to make money. And just like the club system that we just talked about, you have to be very aware of the mechanisms by which they make money. They make money by having you engaged and watching. And so YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, all these things are designed. Their success is measured by the amount of time that you spend on their app. Like that
is the best analogy I've ever heard someone. Club sports and technology platforms have a similar goal of making money off of you. Like that is the best. That's an amazing analogy.
Yeah. And so I'll say like that's the fundamental problem with all these platforms, is that they're not there to make sure that your kid gets a good education. They're not there that your kid only gets the kind of values and the knowledge and the information that you want them to have as their parent and guardian that's trying to shape them into becoming human beings. It doesn't necessarily know, like the platform doesn't necessarily know that it's a kid. Now they might. And if they are a kid, then they'll send them kid appropriate content. But if you spend any time on these platforms, the stuff that's made for kids isn't always good. It's at best, a lot of it is empty calories, right? It's just wasting your child's time. Your child could be doing something more enriching. So the way that I view these things is, especially early on, is there's no way in the world I was going to let my kids watch YouTube without me watching it with them. Like, because the algorithms aren't babysitters. They're not going to make sure that your kid stays on some kind of nicely curated path. Do they try to build things like that? Has YouTube in the past like tried to correct, for the ways in which the different constituencies that use the app interact with it? Yes. We have a YouTube Kids specific app, like an environment for them. But even that, it's still going to be like there's no intelligence applied to it about this is wholesome, good kids content that is going to enrich your kid's life. It's like, we just know that kids like watching this video. And it turns out it's some 8-year-old kid named Sherman who opens, toy packages, and kids get a huge kick out of it. And you're like, you've been watching this kid open toys for the last hour and a half? Like, what?
Instead of playing with them. Yeah.
What in the world? So I definitely, you have to sort of just treat it like you would the rest of the internet. You wouldn't just set a kid loose, with a browser open and just say like, hey, explore the internet. There's lots of good stuff on there. There is, sure. But there's also lots of terrible stuff that you don't want. And what I have also found, and I think all parents can identify with this, is like you start to lose a little bit of control of the information space, and your kids start obtaining knowledge that you're like, wait a second, why did you just say that? Where did you hear that from? Where is that coming from? Can you show me the video that taught you that? And then and that's the scary thing about this thing, is like it's actually your kids have access to the whole world through these apps, and so. Of course, I believe in like close supervision and controls, particularly for my kids. And my kids know, like, they have to ask me if they want to watch YouTube. It doesn't matter that dad works at YouTube. I want to understand, how much of it are you consuming? I don't mind it. It's like, I have very fond memories of watching Saturday morning cartoons. Yeah. Was I learning about the world through that? No. Was I getting smarter? No. But it was fun, and it was enriching, I guess, in some way, part of my childhood. So I don't want them to not know who Mr. Beast is.
Yeah.
I don't want them to not see that one Mr. Beast challenge that he did that all the kids are talking about. Yeah. I want them to be entertained. That's fine. But it's just that. It's entertainment. It's not like I have a free hour, I'm going to go watch YouTube. That's not what we're doing here. You get, a certain amount of screen time, and then that's it. You can watch television, you can watch YouTube, in a way that's approved by mom and dad or not. The thing that I'm starting to get into this zone with my son, because he now has a phone. It's an old iPhone, so there's no cellular plan. It's only when there's Wi-Fi. I've deleted all the apps from it. He's a huge surprise. He's a huge music fan. So music, there's YouTube Music on it, and then there's his like soccer dribbling training app. Those are the two apps that are on that phone. And then I've like, locked down the browser because I just don't. The technology is there for the purposes that I deem it to be there for, not what product designers have deemed it for, because they're not raising my kids and they don't care about, whether my kid turns into, a brain dead, kid who just regurgitates all the internet brain rot humor that he's heard, or he's learning about science stuff, which he does. He's really into that stuff as well. So it really is a powerful tool for good and for bad, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram. And for the most part, these platforms will make tools available to parents.
Yeah.
But sometimes some platforms, I would say, are secretly hoping you don't use those tools because it usually means less time on their app. And as much as everybody wants to be the good guy in the tech world, at the end of the day, everybody's still, it's capitalism. Everybody's trying to grow their business and grow the watch time and grow the dollars. And so it really does require parents to be very vigilant about how and when their kids are interacting with technology. I don't think it's like a scary thing. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing where people are really scared of the technology, but it does require a great deal of intentionality and making sure that you're monitoring, because kids very early on learn how to get sneaky about things.
Yeah.
And it's a trust but verify type of a world as you get older.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. That's one of the best, I think it's probably the best explanation of what it is and how it should be used that I've ever heard. That was very well done. I'm think I want to have you back on the show to have just this conversation. Well, I could talk to you for hours, Marques. This has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know you're busy, though. You said you wanted, more work-life balance, but you chose Sony and Google and YouTube as your employers. So I can't imagine that you don't have other things that you could be doing. So I appreciate you coming on. One of the things that we do with everybody on the show is I want you to go back and think about, what you were like when you were 12, 13, 14, and all the things that you know now. And what advice would you give your young self, knowing the journey that you've been on? What would you tell yourself as you're going to help you go through that journey?
I think the main thing I would tell my younger self is to be more intentional. You don't need to wing everything. You don't need to, take everything one step at a time. Make sure that, the things that you're choosing to do, the people you're choosing to hang out with, the way that you're spending your time, that you're spending it intentionally, that it's for a purpose. That purpose can be fun. That purpose can be to, get better as a basketball player, but also don't just be a basketball player because your dad was a basketball player. Be a basketball player because it's something you care about, you're passionate about, and that you want to do something with,
Yeah.
I think that was, on the one hand, it leads to a very stress-free existence as a teenager, which is good, to kind of just do things just because you don't ever really have to there's nothing at stake. There's no stakes. But I think once you start to get intentional about things, you can put your energy and direct your energy towards those things that are going to be more fulfilling and are going to enrich your life in some way, shape, or form that you can, benefit from more so than just kind of mindlessly wandering through life, hoping things work out.
That's great advice for not only 12, 13, 14-year-olds, but for 51-year-olds like me, right? Like, it is being intentional in the way that you approach things. I that deeply resonates with me as well. I'm trying to impart that advice on my current 14-year-old son. So it's not easy, but it is great advice. All right, now, really important part of the show is that you have to tell me a dad joke. And it can be any dad joke, but I need a dad joke to get me through the rest of my day.
Okay.
All right.
This is one of my grandpa's.
Okay, perfect.
All-timers. Anthony, does your face hurt?
Does my face hurt? No.
Well, it's killing me.
That's not very nice.
Hey, that was my favorite thing about my grandpa.
Did you learn that? Did you learn that on YouTube?
No, that's a Steelman original, and he would wheel that one out to anybody and everybody.
Well, Marques, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed it. It's been way too long since I got the chance to talk to you. I am proud's not the right word because I don't have any right to be proud of you, but just the
you were there. You were part of the journey.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's remarkable as I've done this and gotten the opportunity to talk to some of my former players and what you guys as a group have achieved that I've just had a chance to either be a small part of or a bigger part of as my career grew as a coach. It's remarkable what the group of people that I've had a chance to be around have accomplished in life. It's pretty humbling.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Marques Johnson, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Anthony Leverett's back here on the Next Pitch podcast and just finished up my conversation with Marques. And before I dive into the nuts and bolts of what we talked about and kind of break some of that down, it's just for me humbling to be able to talk to some of these people that I've had an opportunity to coach, and kind of I don't know if being proud of Marques is a right of mine. I don't think that is a right of mine. I didn't have that much impact on his life, but the idea that many of these people that I had an opportunity to be in the same gym with over the course of my coaching career have done so many amazing things is just remarkable to me. The power of sport and what it can do for young people and help in their growth is remarkable. Had a great conversation with Marques and really struck home to me the conversation. His dad was a legend at Oregon State University, holds, NCAA records and played in the NBA for a long time. Marcus's grandfather was general manager of the Portland Trailblazers for many, many years. And the thing that his dad did not do for him or to him was push him into a sport. And we talk about this a lot. It was really interesting for Marques. Marques wishes more that his parents would have pushed him. But I think that's coming from a different and unique perspective, which is his own. And I'm sure that is out there. But I think he also clearly articulated, and I want to bring this back to the surface here. The athletic experience that your kids are going through is their experience, not yours. You had yours, we had ours. Make sure that we don't get too tied to that experience and stress them out so much that they don't enjoy that journey. We've had ours. We need to facilitate a good experience for our kids, but it can't be the one that we wished we had. That needs to be their own. Another thing we talked about is, Marques was a multi-sport athlete. He, played soccer as a kid and then transitioned into basketball and track in high school, and then was very good basketball player and track athlete in college. And the ability to manage all of that has helped him immensely as he has gone through his life. But I think back to, the conversation of being a multi-sport athlete that we started out with in our very first episode, and we continue to talk about, cross-training your brain and your body is healthy. Continue to do that with your kids. Give them opportunity to train in different sports. At some point in time, if they become an elite athlete or show that they have the potential to be an elite athlete, there may need to be some decisions about whether or not they reduce some of the load from a second or third sport. But that training and that ability to grow up learning how to do multiple things in multiple environments, learning how to do different processes of how to become good or better at something is critical and is not fully realized if they only play one sport. And then kind of leads me right into the next thing that Marques and I talked about that I thought was fascinating. He related club athletics to social media. They're there for both of them are there for one reason: to make money off of you. They're not there to teach your kid to be a better human being or the values and the morals that we want them as parents to have. Every family has their own set, but social media and club sports in general are there as a mechanism to make money. And I find it fascinating that the executives within that social media world don't allow their kids unfettered access or access to those platforms without their guidance. And some of them don't allow them at all. And you'll hear Marques, or you heard Marques talking about that during the show. And I think it is a critical thing for us. Don't make a decision based on our podcast. Do your research to find out what that platform or those platforms are doing to your kids' brains, what they're there for, and then make a decision. While it's going to be a hard one, the value that can come from reducing some of that access to that unfettered access to that, I think, is critical, and was great points from Marques. Again, really appreciate him coming on the show. Appreciate you listening. If you like what we're doing and you think what we are doing is valuable, please, like us, share us with your friends, share us with your network. We are really enjoying this process, and hope that our listeners are getting some real value out of this, because if you are, we're enjoying the process. So thanks. And until next time, have a great rest of your week.